Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Denis Onuoha, the Director of Information Security at Arqiva, and today I'll be presenting with my colleague Nathan Dixon, who's our Enterprise Architect for Technology. So today's presentation is going to be centered around real-life attack. We're not going to teach anyone or tell anyone how to secure networks. There's a lot of information out there regarding securing it, and what we thought we'll pose is food for thought. We're conscious everyone's dealing with a lot of stuff, life, work, the whole universe, and sometimes what that means is people miss the big picture. So I'm going to talk today about real-life digital war, what we've been seeing across the world, and we have to track this due to the services Arqiva delivers. So for those that don't know, Arqiva broadcasts TV and radio in the UK. That's a short, high-level summary. What that means for us is that we've got to ensure it's available across 5 nines, so 99.999% of the time. We've also got to ensure that what's actually meant to go on air is what is going on air. So when our customers give us a piece of content, we need to make sure it's delivered to the right customers. So just like at home, you get a post, you expect it to be your post, not someone else's post or your neighbor's post. So we've been tracking the world to see what's going on and what's going on out there. And unfortunately, the picture doesn't look that good. So these are snippets of attacks that have happened since, I would say, probably, in the last sort of 18 months. All started from February 24th last year. So we've seen Russians' TVs hacked. We've seen hackers hack, Ukrainian hackers hack back. We've seen the Russians hack. We've seen radio attacked, broadcasting fake news. And that was pretty easy to spot because the fake news was very, very fake. It wasn't as good as Sadiq Khan's fake news audio for whoever has heard that clip. And again, we're seeing a lot of attacks. And what these attacks are doing, they're very different. Typically, before we'll be worried about ransomware, things going off air, what we're now seeing is legitimate channels being used to scare and intimidate the population. Because a lot of people know, right, if it's on Facebook, I'm not going to trust it. If it's on public media, people will trust it a lot more than they will on what they see on the internet. And there's more. So that was just a snippet. So we've seen satellite systems attacks by jamming. We've seen things being destroyed. This is actually bringing in the newer conflicts. So Israel-Iran, Israel-Palestine and Iran, the Middle East conflict. We're seeing that impact again. Why do we monitor this? We monitor this because, A, we use very similar equipment. People use shared equipment, and we need to understand how the attackers are getting in. Are they phishing people? That's where they send you something pretending to be someone else. Or are they actually exploiting vulnerabilities in the hardware or configuration? So it's one of those 3 things that typically happen. And we try to look at it, investigate it. Getting information is very limited because a lot of the conflicts are closed. And then we use that to build our own defenses. And now I'm going to share an example of how I personally was attacked. So this was an attack from the Russian nation state. And it was actually a fairly complicated attack. So the first thing the attackers did was figure out that I work in Winchester. Unfortunately for them, they figured the wrong Winchester, Idaho. Wrong side of the postcode. I'm on the other side of the pond. Then what they then did was they somehow decided I've got kids. I don't have kids. So they hacked a school in Winchester, Idaho. And then when they hacked that school, they then sent me an email 3 times. They tried to send it. It got blocked at first. Eventually, they bypassed our systems. And when they sent me that email, they actually told me, rather than telling me, I have to pick up my kids, niece, whoever, they actually said they've got a payment for me. And that's interesting because normally they ask you for money, right? They don't normally tell you they want to pay you. So I'm thinking, gosh, customers, cool. No one ever emails me saying they want to pay me. Most people just email me asking me for money, legitimately as well. Quite a lot of them. Every month we all get them and letters. And furthermore, they even give me security advice on how I can secure my machine, right? So I'm thinking, gosh, these people must either be like amateurs hacking the wrong school, doing research, because we all thought, all these nation states, they're very great. They go and figure things out. But that's wrong, far from. So we did research, and we found out it came from the Schmidt Institute of Physics of Earth in Moscow. That's actually where those attacks came from. They didn't just target me, they targeted infrastructure, they tried to get into radio, TV networks, they basically tried to get into everything, and they were really, really desperate. And at first, I told my team, no, this is not possible. Normally you expect advanced kind of super spies, hide things, not kind of cover their track stuff you see in James Bond movies, right? That's what people expect in cyber. What then happened 3 months after this attack was the first Ukrainian attack on Moscow of the drone, the failed drone the drone that was intercepted, failed, whatever anyone wants to say, and it crashed 100 meters from this building. And that building is the headquarters of one of the GRU teams that specializes in invading critical national infrastructure. So that was that definitive proof. So this stuff, why am I sharing it? This stuff does happen. We invest quite a lot to prevent it happening. And I think in the coming future is going to be really, really important, because there's a fact, next year, there's going to be 70 elections in the world. Those elections are going to cover 3.5 billion people. That's half the planet. If we've seen fake news interference in, I don't know, for example, fake news in the US, fake news in Brexit, whichever way you want to believe, social media manipulation, then we've got to consider how we secure our networks and systems that people still trust. So traditional broadcasting. So we've weathered the storm so far. That's it on cyber for now. And I'm going to pass over to Nathan to bring in the second half of the presentation.
Cheers, thank you, Dennis. So I wanted to just share some of the challenges that I think we've got as a media industry, and it was really great actually to hear some of the sessions this morning, because I think certainly some of these resonated with me there. So I think human versus the technology, I think it was Matt might have been talking about that, certainly with the coverage of the events earlier last year. Infosec's an afterthought. I think there's a little bit of a shout out there to the vendors. I think we all get kind of focused on the core functionality, whether it's audio quality or usability, whatever. Actually, we really need the industry to be thinking more about the security aspects to their product that they're selling. The pace of change, I think that goes without saying really, whether it be AI, whether it just be cloud technology, or any technology really is just advancing at a real pace. And that also means those threat actors as well that Dennis was talking about. So they are smart. In fact, it was making me laugh just reading the screen. It said, I think hackers not the brightest bunch. Unfortunately, I think they are actually very, very bright. And that's probably one of the things that we really need to keep up with as an industry. It's a strategic target, as Denis mentioned. I probably don't need to go into that one. And then another term that actually came up in a conversation I was having at coffee break this morning about security by obscurity. And I think that may have played a part, and it perhaps still does play a part in broadcasting today, but I think those days are sadly over. I think we're all consuming commodity products, commodity software, whether it be open source code we've downloaded, whether it be a server, an IT kind of server that we bought. So we're all looking for commodity kind of products and solutions to drive down cost and to make things more flexible. But sadly, that then doesn't mean that only you've got the kind of special knowledge and able to drive that thing. Actually, you can just download the manual from a vendor's website and away you go. So I think that is perhaps something that we thought was perhaps a luxury, and I don't think that is quite a luxury anymore. And then finally, just around the trusting of the content. So Denis certainly hinted at that a moment ago. And I think that's where there's a really interesting aspect from a media point of view. So I think we've all seen the kind of the news stories, and I think that there's lots of evidence at the moment. I think there you go. That was the one you mentioned, wasn't it, Denis? The
Yep.
Sadiq Khan fake news, and there's actually an interesting aspect to that, which is it's not a crime. So there's a whole kind of legal and kind of cultural issue that I think we've perhaps got to deal with there as well. But evidence here that AI is actually writing better phishing emails. I don't know if yours was. Did it have any typos in it, Denis, or not? I'm not sure if it did, but certainly the evidence is that perhaps even if English isn't your first language, for example, that you could use an AI tool to generate more convincing phishing emails than perhaps you would have been able to write yourself. So I think that's a really fascinating angle to it. So not just the content, the media content, we all know about fake news and fake content, AI-generated content, but then thinking about those attacks as well. So can we kind of use that AI and can we use the latest tech to kind of fight back those malicious actors? So could we actually use the AI to generate or to detect fake content? So I think we see lots of that in sort of academic institutions where they're looking for they're looking for generative AI content, whether it's exam papers and things like that. So can we use that technology to detect it? Thinking about radio, could you actually do that live on a phone-in? Could you have some kind of score as to whether the person is a real person that's on the end of the phone? I don't know. Leave it to this crowd here to work out whether that's kind of possible. Attack simulation and training. So we might all think about pen testing, so penetration testing. We maybe get a third party in to do some of this testing for us. Well, actually, can we use the tools to actually to simulate being a human and actually try and attack our networks or our infrastructure? Maybe that's possible. And something that I'm actually personally looking at the moment in Arqiva is some changes and improvements to our sort of threat detection and response. So, can we use those tools to give us greater power and greater visibility and insights into that data that we collect from all of our infrastructure? So could we automate response to anomalous data, anomalous behaviors, human or networks, as we were learning about earlier? Can we use natural language processing? So perhaps I can feed in some code and say, hey, what's this macro in this Word document I've downloaded? What does that actually do? And the generative AI will sort of reverse engineer that and tell you what that piece of code does. Or writing queries as well in systems. So rather than needing deep expertise in a SIEM platform, maybe you can actually just feed it in plain English and it will show you perhaps where who's downloaded this zip file. So rather than writing lots of complex queries, you write it in English and it will tell you that. And code reverse engineering, as I'd mentioned. So I think there's a couple of areas in which AI can help us fight back. I'm sure there are many more, and we'll probably look to the community to kind of help drive those ideas and opportunities. So thinking about a future blueprint, I was kind of trying to come up with a couple of ways of kind of visualizing this to help the discussion. Perhaps two layers, maybe there's even a people layer on the top of this as well, I don't know. But certainly from an infrastructure perspective, I think we'd heard some of these terms earlier, which was really nice to see, sort of microsegmentation and zero trust, so being able to chop up your network into much smaller domains, so only those domains do what they're supposed to do. Could it be around the usability, the piece around sort of biometrics? Do we really want a journalist who's downloading some complex certificate and complex passwords and two-factor authentication keys and I haven't got a signal because I can't get the key through, all that kind of thing? Can we use sort of more biometrics? And that's available today that I'm sure many of you are already using in your daily life. So can we use more of that in media? Disposable infrastructure. So I think that was mentioned actually earlier. So we're deploying much more infrastructure as code these days, whether it be on-prem or whether it be in a public cloud service. So actually, if something bad goes wrong with it, blow it away and redeploy it. That should be a normal way of working. We have to deal with the fact that we know things are going to go wrong and be prepared for when things go wrong. And be prepared to blow it away and redeploy. And then interesting one certainly for media, and it's used more sort of commonplace, if you like, outside of media, is encrypted data in transit and at rest. So I think we think, broadcast, well, everyone will get to hear this anyway, so I don't need to protect this content because it's going to be a free-to-air broadcast. But actually, how do we stop people getting in and actually replacing that content? Is there something that we could do in the end-to-end chain to ensure that that is not tampered with or is not replaced in some way? I talked about the sort of threat detection and response. Can we be AI-powered there to give us greater insights, greater power, as I'd mentioned earlier? But then as we kind of overlay the content aspect, what about this concept of sort of trusted content source, so attested microphones, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. Digitally signed media, so actually fingerprinting and doing checks on that media and actually giving it a certificate to say that piece of audio was recorded here by this microphone or by this person and it hasn't been tampered with. anomaly and deepfake detection. So could that actually be built into our workflows today? Could we do that real time, or could we do that retrospectively? And then if we had this trusted content that was digitally signed, who then validates that that is the right certificate, or who's in charge of kind of mediating and moderating that content? And I wanted to highlight two projects that I've certainly become aware of. So there's the rather large mouthful of Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity, which I'm sure some of you have heard of, C2PA. And that's a kind of a centralized model where a number of broadcasters, news agencies, and so on are able to validate that the content that you may have subsequently edited, they're able to validate that that content was a copy of or a manipulation of the original, but in a good way, and has not been done by bad people. And this other one as well, which we definitely haven't got enough time to talk about it now, but there's a really great project which I can give you the links for. If you go and have a Google, you'll quickly come across it, around this attested microphones with this zero knowledge capability. So the content is recorded on a microphone, so perhaps you'd have that microphone in a parliament or somewhere where you want to ensure that that is absolutely authentic audio, but then you're able to record it, give it a signature, but then you can still go and edit it. So you can put it through your edit facility, you can still manipulate it, and you still have a certificate of authenticity that follows that piece of edited audio. That's really fascinating. There's a couple of guys that work in this zero knowledge forum. Definitely go and have a look at it. It's really fascinating what they've managed to do. And I was actually just thinking this morning, wouldn't that be a cool kind of, could we build something here in some kind of radio TechCon hackathon to kind of get some of this all working, and could we kind of piece something together? I think it'd be a really interesting concept. So just a few things just to wrap up, and a few takeaways to wrap up with and take home with you. So what can we all do? I think there's definitely a shout out to everyone in the room. Be curious about cybersecurity. There's definitely a need as an industry, I think, to up our game. I think the pace of change is so rapid at the moment that I don't think any of us can keep up with it. So go and be curious about cybersecurity. Defense in depth, that was mentioned earlier. So think about your security in layers. Don't just think of a firewall. Don't just think of putting a badge access on a door. Think about in layers. How do you deploy your software? Where's your software come from? Can I have personal user accounts, role-based access to get into systems and so on? There's lots of ways in which you can apply a layered approach. Make small changes. Don't try and save the world and promise you'll get it all working by Friday, because you definitely won't. Challenge yourselves. So I think, as I mentioned, content validation. How could you change your workflows? What could you do? What could we ask our providers to do, our suppliers as well? Have they thought about it? Can we work more collaboratively as an industry? And then there's lots of industry best practice out there. So a couple of things just to shout out. We've got the DPP, so the Digital Production Partnership. So it's definitely more of a TV thing, but they've done a whole lot of great work around their committed to security. I know that the EBU was mentioned again this morning, so they've got a really great approach as well. And the NCSC's Cyber Essentials and the Cyber Essential Plus kind of frameworks in which you can go and assess yourself against and take some best practice from. And then just from a personal point of view, I think I mentioned up there about sort of yourselves and your personal development. I was just double checking this morning, and actually the ISC, who's a recognized industry body for cybersecurity, they're still pushing. I think it's till Christmas, Dennis, isn't it? Yeah, they're giving away a million, what's the word? Free certifications. Yeah, free certifications, and it's your own kind of self-study material. In fact, I did it a couple of months ago, and I found it absolutely fascinating. It was really good. I come from a telecoms and broadcast background. It was great to sort of dip into Dennis's world and actually complete that. So I definitely recommend it. Get your name down quick before I think it times out at the end of this year. And you get to sit an exam as well. It's like a £50, £60 exam you can go and do for free. I would certainly recommend taking that up as well if you can.